Hello, welcome inside the den for Sound Off Sports. Mike Davis here. We're breaking down Shedeur Sanders, his fall to the 5th round. Pretty crazy stuff, as well as Ashton Jeanty going 6 to the Raiders. That and so much more. Plus, Q Myers joins the show. That's all coming up right now.
Make some noise. This is Sound Off Sports, sponsored by Sam and Ash.
Would you have drafted Shedeur Sanders? AD on Facebook says, absolutely. He should have never made it past the 6th pick round 1. They tried to break him and take his confidence, but it only made him stronger.
All right, welcome to Sound Off Sports. Mike Davis along with James Edward Barrickman the fourth. We're breaking down the NFL draft. A lot of discussion, a lot of things to get into, but of course the topic, the thing that everybody's going to remember from the 2025 NFL draft is Shedeur Sanders and his slide.
Insane.
It's insanity. You and me were texting, the entire time, and we were puzzled. We couldn't believe when Dillon Gabriel went before him to the Browns. I gave you a call because I was like, what?
I think at that point when we started seeing like Tyler Shuck would go, and then, Dillon Gabriel and some of these other quarterbacks that pre-draft, they weren't even on the radar to potentially go before Shedeur Sanders. You started just like, it blew your mind.
Yeah.
You almost started feeling bad for the guy because these guys aren't better than Shedeur Sanders. And I ticked a lot of people off. I'm in my group chats with a lot of my friends, and I'm like, Dillon Gabriel
right
above Shedeur Sanders? Tyler Shuck, these guys aren't better than Shedeur Sanders. So I think it really said a lot about what NFL teams think of Shedeur personally,
right?
Rather than, what he's really capable of on the field.
And we know the interview draft process for him was not good. It was not a good situation.
We talked a lot about that leading up to the draft.
Right.
Those anonymous reports that came out, and we kind of questioned how true they were.
Right.
But I mean, looking at that now, there has to be at least a significant amount of truth to that.
Yeah, we were giving, Tom Pelissero, all those reports that came out, the unnamed GMs and coaches, like we were thinking, okay, why are you, putting all this pressure, all this negative talk on a guy without coming out and saying, putting your name on that statement. But now it really seems like the sentiment around the league was shared, and that's why we're asking everybody at home, would you have drafted Shedeur Sanders? He fell to the 5th round. Was that a mistake for other organizations to really pass on him? The Raiders passed on him 6 times. Let's hear what somebody had to say from home.
Hey, this is Zach Palmer. I'm 18 years old. I'm pursuing a sports career. But knowing what I know about sports, I can confidently say I've never been a fan of Deion Sanders and his cocky attitude. Athletes as a whole are not the most humble people ever, but I love a humble athlete. Shedeur Sanders is not one of them, and I believe he gets it from his father. In my opinion, I think Shedeur Sanders went at a very low position, and as a lifelong Raiders fan, though I hate Shedeur Sanders and his arrogant attitude, I believe that where the Browns got him, I would not have been upset if the Raiders drafted him as well. But I can't believe that Shedeur fell so low. It was the biggest shock in the draft. I mean, you look at ESPN's analytics, they said that they would have less than a 1% chance that Shedeur would fall so low. Thank you, Fox 5.
Yeah, so it's interesting because
we were talking about the Raiders taking him at 6.
Right. And that's why, would you have liked to see the Raiders? Because I think there's 2 things happening here. One, the Raiders are growing up. I think an old style, an old, narrative of the Raiders would be they probably would have pulled the trigger on a guy like that. Now, I don't know if that's the right or wrong thing.
Yeah.
But it's a grown-up organization.
That was like your first takeaway from the draft was the Raiders really grew up, and I agree. That I think being able to show a little restraint, and not just take that big name falling at a position of need, I think says a lot about where they're at right now.
Do you think Shedeur, because I think in a lot of people's eyes now, he's going to have the opportunity to win over the public in, I think, a very big way. And perhaps he goes to the best place suited for him because Cleveland has not had a quarterback who's been solid for a very long time. They could really use a guy who could come in and be a superstar quarterback. I mean, their last stud was probably like a Bernie Kosar, and he wasn't like the best player in the league.
I mean, we're seeing what Baker's doing now.
Yeah,
and they let him walk.
And Baker, they let walk away. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think now Shedeur in a room that has Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Joe Flacco, and now Shedeur Sanders, do you think he actually is going to have this job at the end of the day?
That's a great question because we saw the success that Joe Flacco has already had in this offense. I think he has as good a chance as any, to become the starter there. And yeah, he slid down draft boards. And a friend of mine made a good point. I think a question we need to be asking ourselves is if Shedeur Sanders didn't have all this going on around him, and he wasn't the son of primetime Deion Sanders, and he wasn't legendary, and he didn't necessarily have, character issues or team first questions, would he still have been a second round pick? Because when you're if NFL teams viewed you as a second round talent, but you have all this stuff going on, that drops you several rounds. So that being said, he's a 5th round pick drafted after Dylan Gabriel. I think he's got plenty of opportunity to become the starter there.
Yeah.
I mean, Kenny Pickett, we've seen what he's done in Pittsburgh. He's going to have another opportunity in a new offense. I think probably behind Flacco, he's probably the number 2 option day one.
This is going to be a storyline for years to come. This quarterback draft class from Cam Ward to Jackson Dart to Tyler Shuck to Jalen Milroe to Dylan Gabriel and, of course, to Shedeur Sanders. There's always going to be a comparison or a point of comparison there. So we'll see what happens there. For more on everything Shedeur, everything Raiders, everything Ashton Jeanty, we got Q Myers joining us in the studio after this.
Would you have drafted Shedeur Sanders? Chris Wheat on Facebook says, because no one wants to deal with an arrogant marginal QB and his helicopter daddy. This duo was so arrogant that Deion was saying months ago where he would allow his son to play. Lucky for them, Jimmy Haslam makes really dumb decisions, and both of them are now the Browns' problem.
All right, everybody, welcome here inside the Den, Sound Off Sports. We got the fan favorite in the flesh, in the studio, in the den. It's Q Myers. Q, great to be with you. Great to see you.
This is awesome.
It's good.
I like to be in the den.
You're in your natural habitat.
I am, man. This is awesome.
It's great to have you here. You were just in Green Bay for the NFL draft, doing all your stuff with Joe and Q, ESPN Radio, ESPN Las Vegas. So let's break down some of the big storylines. I would love to break right into the Raiders, but I don't think we can do that.
Right.
I think we got to talk about a little bit of what we were doing last time with Shedeur.
Yeah.
Okay. So Shedeur Sanders, you had a funny little anecdote for us. Tell us, you were traveling back to Vegas, and a lot occurred before his name was called.
It is so funny, man, because, again, that was the biggest storyline at the draft was Shedeur. Regardless of any other player, any other team, it's like, when is this guy going to get selected? I left early on Saturday morning, flew out around 6 a.m. in Green Bay, right? So I guess that's Central Time.
Yeah.
So I got to Vegas. I went to the barbershop. And my barbershop, as many could tell you, is not just the fastest shop. Like, you don't just run in.
Hang.
Yeah, you hang out, you talk a little trash, you watch the draft, which I was doing, and I got my hair cut. I went to the car wash and got my car washed. I don't know if you know, but car washes aren't the fastest places either. They kind of take their time too. So I'm listening.
This is a hand wash. This is not just a
yeah.
Okay.
It's a hand wash. It's like, take your time, relax. You better sit for a while. So I'm listening to the radio, listening to the draft. I get everything done. I get back to the house, turn on the draft. He still hasn't got selected yet. I was like, what are we doing?
Okay.
It became comical.
So 5th round, 144th overall draft pick.
Yep.
Dylan Gabriel was drafted ahead of him. Now you got a Cleveland Browns draft room with Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, Joe Flacco, and Kenny Pickett. So before we get into the Browns and why they were the franchise, the organization to take this leap of faith, why did he fall? I've been asking this to everybody. Why do you really think he fell? Because you and I were kind of there for number 6 for the Raiders with him.
Right.
So why did Shedeur fall?
I think overall the league didn't think he was as great as he thought he was. right? And I think he's a really good quarterback. Like, make no mistake about it. Like I said, I was very much with the Raiders getting him at 6. I was good with that. I think the league does not think he's great. And I don't think that they like the process that he goes through. I don't think they like the cameras on everywhere, the legendary this, the legendary that. I don't think that they like all of that. And so once he dropped out of the first round, it became like, well, he might be a backup quarterback. Do you want all this with a backup? So I started hearing conversations about they don't want a guy who's going to be a silo in the locker room where it's about me, 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 and not we.
Right.
And that's a possibility. That's a strong possibility. Once it got to round 5, I was like, whoa, hey, man, like you might want to go undrafted so you can pick your location as opposed to a team selecting you. That might end up being better for him. He goes to the Browns. They just picked Dillon Gabriel. Like, that blew our mind in the media room there at the draft. We're like, whoa, I saw it, and I hate that I saw it before it actually got announced that it was Dillon Gabriel, and someone across from me was like, oh, this is going to be Shedeur, and I was like, no, it's not. And he's like, no way, and I said, just wait for it, and it just was the biggest roar that you would ever hear. When they announced Dillon Gabriel, the whole room was like, oh my gosh, like it was unbelievable that they actually took Gabriel. He didn't even expect to go that early.
So Dillon Gabriel, listen, I'm not a scout. I didn't play ball, but I think most people would feel Shedeur is a better quarterback than Dillon Gabriel. So the question then becomes, okay, if you don't see him as a superstar, a lot of organizations and franchises, they draft players in the second and third round. They use a premium pick on a quarterback. Now, we saw it with Seattle, right? They signed a big deal for Matt Flynn, and then what do? They draft Russell Wilson.
Yep.
The Eagles had Carson Wentz. They draft Jalen Hurts.
Right.
Nick Foles when he was originally drafted in the 4th round or something like that, 3rd or 4th. So my question is, okay, we know there's a lot of stuff going on off the field.
For sure.
His interviews may have gone like Step Brothers with John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell. But if the talent is there in the most important position, not in the NFL, in all of sports, and he has potential, why would teams not even question pulling the trigger? Is it that big of an issue to have a guy like that in your franchise, and you just think owners were taking them off the board? So that's what I still can't wrap my head around.
Well, that's the thing. If he was elite talent, they would have taken him.
But was Russell Wilson elite talent when he was drafted out of Wisconsin?
No, but they took him in the 3rd round. But the one thing he was, and this is what I believe.
But he was 5th round.
But no, I know. But Russell was a winner. That's the one thing I did. I fully believe Russell Wilson was a winner when he entered the draft.
So you think when guys like that are selected, it's less so about the traits and more so about we're unsure.
Right.
But we know he's a good guy to have.
And they knew that Russell Wilson wasn't going to stir anything up in the locker room. He's a good guy, in their word, right? And again, when you get into the 3rd, 4th, 5th round and you have a guy that's documenting everything, filming everything, and, it's not what every team wants. They rather take a chance on a safe guy like Dillon Gabriel, who might not be as talented, and I don't think he is as talented as Shedeur, but he's safe. He's going to go in there, and they're going to say, hey, man, we need you here at 6. He's going to get there at 5:55, right?
So Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, GM and head coach with the Browns, did not look thrilled.
No, not at all. That was something that stood out to me too. Berry was just like, okay.
So what does this say more about the Browns organization and the Jimmy Haslam and all that stuff? Because it seems like a lot of organizations are like, thank you to the great Q Myers, ESPN Radio, Joe and Q. Make sure you go check him out. We got more SOS after these words.
Can Ashton Jeanty be the next great Raiders running back? Marco Romero on Facebook says, not with that O-line.
Well, the Raiders got their guy, Ashton Jeanty, running back from Boise State, 6th overall draft pick. A guy that, had a lot of discussion. There was a lot of media members saying this was going to be the fit. And for a team like the Raiders that had the worst running game in the NFL last year with a new coach and Pete Carroll who likes to have that run game present, it seems like this is a perfect fit. I mean, the silver and black, we were accustomed to the Marcus Allens, the Bo Jacksons, having a good running back in that backfield. Yeah, even a McFadden from Arkansas who had a lot of juice coming out of college. It's great to finally have another star-powered player right there. And now, when you think about it, James, having Brock Bowers from last year and Ashton Jeanty, you got two pieces there that could be faces of the league in some regard for this Raiders offense.
Yeah, Listen, I wouldn't have been my pick at 6 overall. I love Ashton Jeanty, the prospect, but let's be real here. The Raiders' run game problems last year weren't because of who their running backs were. It was because of how poor their O-line was. And to me, at the running back position, unless you're special and you're transcendent, a Saquon level type, that's not a guy I am willing to take with a 6th overall pick or a pick that high, because at the end of the day, you're only as good as your offensive line at that position. And while I love Ashton Jeanty, and he's going to be a great player for the Raiders, I think that they could have used that pick a little more wisely and gotten a similar talent later in like the second round, in like a Henderson or a Judkins or somebody like that.
Right. And even, Hampton went, to the Chargers at the back end of the first round. But I think regardless of, having another discussion about running back value and where that should be in the first round, let's focus maybe on the fact that, is this a guy who could be the next great Raiders running back? And
There's no question about that.
And from 100%. Spy Tech and Pete Carroll, it seems like they, from their evaluation, not just as a player, but as a person, this is a guy that has just so many special qualities. And in a draft like this, I think some organizations feel, we can't decipher other people's boards. So if this is our guy and we have the opportunity to get him, we can get him. And, and we got to go do it. And there's a lot of people that think, okay, if the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't trade up to 2, he wouldn't have been there, Jeanty, at 6. Right. So he could have went 5. There's a lot of different questions at play, but let's go to the people at home. Let's hear what people are saying. We asked whether Ashton Jeanty can be the next great Raiders running back. Let's hear what they had to say.
And I cannot explain to you how excited I am for Ashton Jeanty. I am probably the biggest Josh Jacobs super fan that you'll find out there. And I think that he could be on par with Josh Jacobs going in. Some may say he's better.
So,
we didn't even mention Josh Jacobs when we were talking those great Raider running backs. So apologies to Josh Jacobs, because he was a stud in his own right.
And he played tremendous with the Packers last season. Yep. And, but I think you're right, James. And it's like, there are certain players that could be transcendent. Mm-hmm. Jeanty could be in that Saquon type of category. When we're talking Bijan, when we're talking, Saquon, I think Jeanty's in the mix for some of those types of, electrifying players.
A lot of people think so, and clearly the Raiders did as well. I just, in my own evaluation, love Jeanty. He's going to be a great player in the NFL. I think he's not, I don't think he's a Saquon level. I think he's closer to those Henderson, Judkins types.
Yeah.
And you could get those kind of guys for a much lesser price.
And the Raiders are starting to make moves to prioritize the line. Jackson Powers-Johnson, the second-round pick last year, he's now going to move over to center, a natural position for him where he played with the Oregon Ducks. They drafted this guy, Charles Grant, from William & Mary, another rookie from this draft class. A lot of teams were high on him. So now they're going to really start formulating this offensive line. And we kind of see the distinction in a draft a few years ago with Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. Bijan maybe had a lot more firepower and talent traditionally, and Gibbs is a tremendous running back, but then you see the schemes, you see the offensive line, and when you have more to work with, the type of career Jahmyr Gibbs has been having, it packs a different punch so far than Bijan because of the surrounding setup.
No doubt.
So,
no doubt. Situation matters.
Right. So if we could develop that situation and then have Jeanty 5 years now with this stud at running back, I think it's going to be a super helpful thing for this team moving forward. Quick question, though, it comes from a fantasy perspective.
Okay.
Where does Ashton go this year? Would you take him ahead of a Saquon Barkley, ahead of a Jahmyr Gibbs? Where are you taking Ashton Jeanty in fantasy?
I just had a dynasty draft that finished up yesterday.
Yes.
Rookie draft, Ashton Jeanty was the number 1 overall pick, and shortly after that, I saw ESPN Fantasy released their top 10 player rankings for the upcoming fantasy season. Ashton Jeanty was number 6 overall. So take that for what it's worth. I think he's just going to be worth it from a volume perspective. That Raiders O-line still needs some work up front to give him some holes to run through, but he's going to be a top 10 fantasy.
He might be the face of fantasy football. We'll see. Brock Bowers is already the guy to get at the tight end position. Guys, coming up after a short break, it's sink or swim time.
Can Ashton Jeanty be the next great Raiders running back? David Houghton on Facebook says he has to make the team first. Nothing is guaranteed.
Social media is obsessed with one question right now, ladies and gentlemen. Whether 100 men, or 100 people, I should say, could defeat one gorilla. James, you and I are on totally
we're
separate
on opposite
ends.
sides of the spectrum here.
I think the gorilla would beat. You take 100 people from Trader Joe's, 100 people from a random supermarket,
I think this
Walmart.
is important to nail down, though. What are the terms? And where is this happening? Is it an enclosed space? And who are the 100 people? Is it 100 men? Is it 100 of anybody?
I'm just saying the first 100 people you see at a Walmart, the first 100 people to walk into a Walmart on a Wednesday, you take them, you put them in an enclosed space, and you put a gorilla.
Like a North Central West Virginia Walmart? Because I'm taking those people.
Okay, I just think the gorilla's going to win. What do you really... You really think people? How would you do this?
I think easily. I don't even think you need 100 people. I think, and I have a hot take here, and I don't look right in the camera when I say this. I think you really only need 25, 30 people to get this job done. Even 50 is a little bit too much. I think 100, it's no question. Eventually, these people are going to overwhelm them. The 10, 15 first people that attack this thing, they're probably goners. But 100 people, 50 people to 60 people, they're not even going to do anything.
This is an animal from the jungle. This is, and
I think
fight or flight of a gorilla in the jungle compared to just people shopping at Walmart.
Humans have fight or flight too.
Not to the degree of a gorilla.
They don't have the same strength and speed that a gorilla has. But I think you're totally overestimating. You're acting like we're fighting King Kong here, or some superhero gorilla. This isn't, this isn't Superman.
This would be the best game show of all time. If that
would be some Hunger Games.
Pay-per-view for the 100. But, everybody's on different sides of this. Please give us a shout out. Tell us on social media what you think we want to know. Thanks so much for joining us here on Sound Off Sports. We'll see you next time.